Thinking about my life in Denmark is a story that's common and unique at the same time. It's very common because I'm a refugee who came to Denmark when my parents did, and it's unique because I was active in many ways others weren't, and had my own path and way in the Danish society. And so maybe highlights from this could be good for the mind to reflect on. Um, I came to Denmark as a kid who were like 5, 6 years old, on the way to becoming 7. And immediately I remember when we arrived, we were at the German Bahnhof, the German railroad station one night, and we had to sleep over there, waiting for the train to Denmark. These old rumbling trains. That was in 1985, one winter in 1985. And when we arrived at the Danish border, I and my family were received by the police. We had these big bags with our suitcases and necessarily clothes and stuff in it, and left everything else behind in our home in Lebanon. We were a Lebanese family, not a Palestinian family, and uh, where my parents chose to run away from the entangled civil war that had been going on for 10 years at that point, and nobody could see an end of it. And so they took this very crucial decision to try to establish themselves in a new place, and they learned about the ways to get there. And at that time, the Eastern European countries helped migrants to get through to West Europe, some kind of Cold War situation. And so we came to Denmark, and they looked into our papers and immediately drove us in the police cars to the asylum centers, where they receive people of all kind. And there we stayed, and then we got moved to a center that was more friendly for families. All at the time, the Red Cross workers working around and with and in these centers had a very humanistic view of people, and knew that people come of all sort of suffering, and that leaving your home country isn't easy. So they had this humanitarian view on people, and that was a good help. And so people were mostly friendly in those systems. Also, the police, very, very quiet and friendly, and you didn't feel scared or annoyed by them. And when we came to that asylum center, we finally got to the final destination where we applied getting to West Jutland, called Agar. It's a place near the sea where a lot of, at that time, Lebanese and Palestinian people had gathered, and that was the best place to be while waiting, so you could be among your own and people you recognize. And the same goes for the Danes when they went to other countries in the United States to establish themselves, for instance, or when they buy houses in Spain or Turkey, they also cluster and keep close together. So there's nothing they should say to other people about sticking close and being wanting each other. That's a very natural thing for any people in any culture. And so we came to this Agar, and we stayed there for over a year. And at the same, we had also some stay in Blokhus. And altogether, it was a strange experience for a small kid, sitting on hold, not being part of the education system neither the country, and not really being back in his home country. So the first experience of Denmark was that of kindness, but still insecure future. And it took a long time to deal with asylum seekers, still does, but at that time, 1, 2, some people 3 years, and people could get rejected. And so one day we also got a rejection letter saying that you have no politically motivated reason for asylum. Your parents are not part of any special movement, or death, threatened by death or something like that if they go home. And so we applied again for a humanitarian reason because of the war, the civil war that makes it very impossible to live. And they took a long time studying that, but when they finally got back, that bureaucracy, they said that, well, you don't have a humanitarian reason either, because we just don't find it's so impossible to live there. You can find somewhere to go. And so they wanted to ship us out of the country again. And I remember how hard that was on my mom after living in a small room for 1.5 years. And they got good friends at that time. And I remember I became a small translator for the people living there, going with them to the office to help them with several issues, because I could speak some words English. I started school in Lebanon when I was 4 years old. I was a bright student in a private school. And so those few years of English helped me a lot in getting on, and also having this role in the daily life. Otherwise, I would be stuck in the room waiting for asylum, and we were not allowed to leave the area. Occasionally, families we were on tours to the landscape or seaside, and I remember at that time, it was maybe one of my first time watching nude people on a beach, or almost nude. And here we had this very traditional Arabic community and Lebanese community. Even though some have been Christian, they do not go about the beaches with no clothes, and that was a kind of a new thing. I met with a Danish culture of naturality, and just walk past the others without looking or noticing. And I remember how my parents tried to shield us from these experiences, because that didn't go well with their traditional view of keep your clothes on at any time if you are in the public, and don't let people see your pubic hair and all that, or your special areas. And that was a contrast that really was huge. Another contrast for us and for me was our background, and that we felt when we finally got the permit to live in Denmark. And I remember how I ran around the center with the papers, very, very happy and relieved that now finally we could start having a life. And my parents chose to stick to the West Jutland community and live there, close to some Arab people they knew. But then the civil war ended, and they wanted seriously to go home. In the meanwhile, I had been going to Danish school and learning about the Danish, especially the language, which I picked up relatively quickly. And I got into some trouble with some of the kids, because I could react a bit hot-headed to their comments on my skin and hair color, and saying my name in a very mean way, because my name is not easy to pronounce and wasn't like the most common name in these parts of the land. And it's maybe in their eyes and head associated with negativity and people of that religion who are not good people. And so I didn't know that before, much later, but I knew how it affected me, how it brought up the anger in me of not being included and not being part of society and the school environment. But that was helped along by the good teachers we had, who made it easier for me to be there. And I got some friends with time, started playing football, and things went on track again anyhow, and they stopped commenting on my black hair, and we had good time together, and even if they joked, I knew it was for fun and not a mean thing to say. But that showed me a little bit about the deep rejection that these people can have to people from other places, especially if they don't look like them, or maybe like me, short-legged and not that tall and beautiful creature they can be, or they associate themselves of being. And later I understood that happens to a lot of other also Danish kids, feel themselves outside if they have autism or any kind of handicap. They are also excluded from the normal community who see themselves as being lucky, born in normality, and they try to praise themselves with that by excluding handicaps, and that's a very bad culture, and that's a way of like showing an ugly face of society and living. It's the old Spartanian way of only the healthy, and the old Nazist way. Only the healthy and beautiful um, should have the access and be part of the community, and the others, well, they are outcasts in a way. That already started in schools, I have to say that very honestly. And people don't speak about these issues because they don't want to hurt any feelings, and maybe they're afraid of the Danish hammer coming down on their head if they start speaking about this. But now I think that many Danes, they can relate to it and understand it reflexively, that that's not a good culture. And that's a bad way, because people, even if they are short-legged or have a handicap, they have other powers or good things in them. At least they are human, and the compassion is necessary. And so I grew past by these things, and then a crucial decision happened when my parents wanted to go home. And it was 1990, and at that area we had that guy from Iraq, Saddam, invading Kuwait, and my father was very, very scared that a new war would erupt, and they will cut off the supplies to the oil, and maybe all the Arabs will be deported, or there will happen some things that we couldn't look better into. At the same time, the civil war in Lebanon had ended formally, and the Palestinians were shipped out, and then the Israelis didn't have that threat on their neck anymore, and then the Lebanese had to find themselves again and try to relate. And so they saw the opportunity to go back and help build that country and be part of it. But that was a failed plan, because they didn't have a plan. It was just, yeah, let's go back home and see what happened. That's how they've been living since the 50s, 60s, where my parents were young. They knew that anywhere you turn, you can get a job, and they really got jobs. And my father had a very good job at the harbor as a kind of a shipping boss, and and my mom was a seamstress at one of the houses and the shops that made the dresses, and they were content and happy, and everybody could find himself in a way in society. It was their own local society. The smell of it, the taste of it is important, and that's why I understand why they wanted to go home. But for me and my sisters, it wasn't easy, because we had just barely made it through to this culture and becoming safe and secure and being part of it and growing into it. And now we're gonna shift again to the old culture, where there has been fear and insecure, and we have been drawn out of our beds as kids because of the war and the bombings. I never forget this. Since I was 2-3 years old, I can remember, as early as I can remember, from time to time they had to hide us somewhere in the building, because of the bombings or the fightings, or the shooting could erupt between these militias or the Syrian army and the local fighters fighting for the independence of the country, and things just got very hot and difficult. And so I'm gonna go back to that. That wasn't easy. So that shift also wasn't prepared, and my parents had hard time getting back on their feet down there. They hadn't saved money, and they hadn't prepared well, and so it was set for failure, and truly it failed. So we were to go back here, and when I got back with my sisters, and we had to go over the asylum center once again, I think I got traumatized already at that point, because then you have to deal with extraordinary trouble in your life. I know other kids have had these troubles in their life. I'm not the only one. Maybe some have had much more harsh and difficult times. But at that point, I remember that that was really, really like going into a void and being part of nothing again. And so 2.5 years went in the asylum center in Aalborg, in the center of the town. But I was teenager at that time, and I wasn't kept in the room anymore. So I went out to meet with people, and had this girl I liked and met with in secret, and had these newly come what do they call Yugoslavians, Serbians and Bosnians who fled the war and met out there playing chess or cards or just sitting in the nights. And so I wanted I wanted to grow, and finally I was sent out in a Danish school so I could catch up with the Danish language. That was the humanitarian leader of the center who thought that these kids can't speak Danish. They shouldn't just be sitting around here. They should have a somewhat normal school time, and that was very good, and I'm thankful to that today. And so once again, the bureaucracy dragged out, and the rejection came, and the second rejection, and that time they didn't accept our humanitarian cause, and they said, well, the civil war is finally over, and you have no reason, according to the law, to stay here. It must be extraordinary measures. And so we applied for these extraordinary measures because some Danish people helped us, saying that you have a relationship to this country, and the kids can speak Danish, and they do not feel safe and secure in their home country. They do not belong to that culture anymore. And so the pressure were put on the politicians to allow us to stay. And my sister and I were taken underground for around 15 days, hidden in a farm or a small house in a small village with a Danish lady. And I remember how we felt strangers and insecure, and we had to keep our worries for ourselves, at the same time like deal with the situation at hand. And that was also when the television came and met me for my first interview to talk to me about our extraordinary situation, and they could see I could speak Jutlandic Danish in a very clear fashion, and I had my friends voting for me to stay, and they had sent letters to the Ministry of Interior to give us the asylum. And so finally that minister, Birte Weiss, she signed the special letter that they give to people from time to time to allow this special family to stay, because they have these kids related to Denmark. And so we were let into society. What they didn't know at that time was that I was a bit traumatized by that, and I have had some kind of inner rejection. You know, that's what happened to you when people reject you. You reject them back. And when a culture is not easygoing on you, that doesn't always break you. And even if it breaks you, it gives you like sometimes the inner power to want to reject it back and don't want it. And so maybe the wisest thing was not to stay, but that's what happened. And we grew up in here, in this. And so at that time I had been exploring alternative ideas, or back to the original culture of my Muslim community, and started bringing my attention to religion and spirituality. And I thought that helped me a lot, and I believe this day today that it was also God's grace that opened that small door. Otherwise it would have been very, very shut and closed, and we would have been back in the country where things didn't go well, and I don't know what way we would have taken from there, but maybe things would have turned out well anyhow. So sometimes you cling to one thing, but maybe you should have just let go of it. And so we clinged to Denmark, and we wanted to stay and be part of this beautiful paradise, and so we got to do so, but after hardships. And I don't know, that made me grateful and happy, but at the same time also traumatized and rejecting. And so I had this path of alternative life that started from that point. So I became like part of a double-sided culture. I was part of the Danish school and the travel culture and the language, and continued in high school. At the same time, I had this alternative spiritual and religious schooling that in itself isn't dangerous or bad. It was just a way of giving me a secure identity and helping me through life, because I was that awkward kid that didn't fit in the normality. And so I found an alternative community that helped me through, and I felt the brotherhood and friendship of these Muslim religious people who were very peaceful and didn't want any fight with anyone. But beneath it and inside it were also this ideology of religion using politics for its own gains. And these people were there and they tried to affect me as well. That's what I talk about in my books, that they try to manipulate or make an effect on young people like me. And so some of them did. And especially one movement that I'm going to talk about later, and that has been published also in my book, and I focused a lot on it. And later, that Italian researcher Lorenzo Vedino had also been visiting me in Greenland to talk about my years with that movement of the Brotherhood. And then I won't talk about that now, but I had this double-sided relation to the Danish society, one that appreciated it and was part of it and went to study in it and accepted the ideas of both secularism and the culture. And the second was that mentality of being in a religious and spiritual community that held the truth and was alternative. And when my ideological side also started growing, I became more and more attached to this alternative society. So I went on in my life with these double sides, and many others does. I'm not the only one, and there are many still today, and even more than there were at my time, of the younger generations who are attached to more than one thing. And that's what's a very special situation for many people, even Greenlanders. When I went there, I saw some of them were partly Danish and partly Greenlandic, and some of them lives in Denmark and have this double side to it. And the same goes for the Danish who have a special affiliation with a Communist Party or the right-wing party, or have very conservative Christian views. They do not fit in normality either, and they go alternative paths, but sometimes it can be easier for some than others. And so I went on these two paddles and two legs and tried to keep the balance between them very peacefully, as much as I could. I had some incidents that of course showed that there was a growing troublesome situation underneath the surface, but I got past them. We had this incident in my high school with this girl who tried to shut me up in a group work, and I reacted very, very harshly to her because I didn't wanna that big fat pig to tell me what to do. I was just a Clint Eastwood of myself, and wanted to take out every anger back on her, and put her in place. And then we had a situation with my family and my kids, family sisters, in schools as well, because of certain cultural differences. And later we had a focus on our religious community from the local media, and so it went on, and I could see we were going closer and closer towards like a kind of clash. And I was aware of what's going on, but not so much. As a young man, you just live it more than understand it, and you look back at it now 20, 30 years later and can maybe express some more things about it. So we had this 11 September situation that shocked everyone, including myself. And I know we have expected something, because there was a growing ideology in the West and a war with the West from these fighters that really wanted to clash with the West and wanted to break it down, break that false god of democracy and what they thought was a bad way of life, controlling the East and holding people back from their prosperity, and they wanted to fight it in their way, and of course that was a very hard thing for everybody else who were not part of it. And so everything clashed after September 11, and we had very hard times being especially religious people in the community. And I remember that Danish convert from Copenhagen told me, we're gonna meet some very tough years to come now, and people will ask us all sorts of questions, and they will segregate us and maybe put us in the same line as these fighters and people. And so that's part of what was like clashing also in my own mind and life. Fortunately, and that's a strange thing to say, I was already so much part of the brotherhood that I could listen to the voices of reason saying that we do not clash with societies we have lived in peacefully, and we do not sneak in and try to react from within. That's immoral and wrong by the religious ideas, and that's what kept me out of any affliction maybe. At the same time, I was part of the Danish education system. It's like I could take one casket on at one time and the second on another. I had my religious identity with me at any time and my views, but I understood that here I am not that religious preacher or man who can dominate. I'm a minority. I'm just me, and I am learning and accepting um, the teachings in those places as we should, and get through the education as we should, and so we did. And I got to be a teacher and was hired in a Danish Turkish run school in Aarhus, and was there for a few years. And then the Khartoum crisis happened, and then I got the biggest clash in my life, and things changed dramatically from there on. And I have put that into an account, a detailed account, other places, both in the books and now lately, fortunately, in YouTube as well. And so up to these years, between 2001 and 5, I was both a teacher, a translator, and was looking for love, and had actually been in love with a woman I wanted to marry, and we didn't get to because she was African, and there were some cultural barriers that prevented us from that. And I wish her all good luck and prosperity, and maybe she's lucky she didn't marry me, because that would have brought her into a course of crashing. Or maybe if it happened, maybe it would have brought me out of the course of clashing. I don't know which one it could have been. But things in Denmark got worse in those years, because we got a right-wing government supported by very anti-Muslim communities in politics, and so we could feel the harshness of it and the rejection. And that wasn't a problem, because as soon as you finish school and study, you just went back to your community and lived there like the Jews used to do in their cantons and ghettos, because they knew they want to hold on to their culture, and they weren't allowed to in the former century. And I was told that by the rabbis who lived in Denmark, and one of them died recently. He told me we couldn't have the Jewish facade here, and our synagogue had to be way back, so it wasn't visible from the street. So it was a mono-religious culture that didn't like Jews being too visible. So we had to work from within to keep our strength and keep together. And that's exactly what the Muslim community did, and especially the religious part of it, because they weren't the most common people around. But we started like also getting more and more people into these religious communities, and they were affected by different thoughts. And I remember several converts, people who came from Danish background and changed their religion to Islam because they could see something in it, or maybe they needed a spiritual journey. And I feel this day to day, and at that time sometimes sorry for these people, because they do not know what they're getting into. Maybe Islam isn't the worst thing to change into as a religion. It's not that. I know some people think that, but it's not. It can be just as spiritual and good-mannered as anything else. But the problem lies beneath and beyond that, and behind it, where all these dominating, conflicting groups who wants to take people into their own views and ideologies, they can sometimes affect people with their own special way of looking at life. And that's not the Muslim faith as a whole. So there would be a big difference who you got in contact with in the first place. Is it a spiritual guided person, or is it a politically motivated one, or is it a very conservative and and totally strict and closed-minded person, as they call them. Maybe they don't feel closed-minded; they feel like they are sticking to the rules, and the others aren't. But anyhow, for a new person who converts and come into these communities, it's like that. It's who is it who is affecting me from the beginning, and I could see different shapes of these converts, Muslim converts, all according to whom they were influenced by. So we had them in different colors and shapes. Some of them looked more like the Turkish, others looked like more than Moroccans, and some looked more like the fighting people from the villages of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and others looked more like the more relaxed types that we can find in the Bosnian and what can you say, Western European communities and Tunisian and so on. So they were very different as the groups that actually gave them the culture of the religion. And I don't know, it's always been puzzling me why it is like this and how it can be, and at the same time they share the same ground beliefs, but were in different communities. And so those years were hard, and then came the Khartoum crisis. That was the biggest event I had in my life, and that's why everything keeps centering around it, and all my talks have been centered around that story, and I always go back to it. It's the time before and the time after, and I put a detailed account on it somewhere else for 4 or 5 hours in Arabic and 2 or 3 hours in English, and I made a summary, and it's also published in my Danish books. Unfortunately, the books never got to a wider publicum in any English or Arabic speaking nations. But that event changed a lot for me and made me reflect forever after on my relational life and upgrowing path in Denmark, and who I am and who I became, and why I was who I was, and how I could do something about it. And here I have to be thankful to both my family and the community, and also part of the Danish society that also lets you grow into your challenges. And I met people who said that's normal. You are a young man and you get affected by ideas, and with time you will find your way and your place. So I met good people also reflecting on my life in a good manner. I met them also in my religious community, saying that, helping me on with education, helping me through all kind of difficult choices sometimes that we stood with. So I'm very thankful to all these people, even though they maybe don't think I have this value for them in my life, but I do. And so here I am, 20 years after, having 4 kids and 2 marriages and a third relation, and yeah, looking back at how I was brought up in Denmark, part of this country, which I deeply and innerly are thankful for, because it gives us shelter and an opening to stay, and they believed in our abilities to be part of this society. And I'm also thankful for the religious community that saved me from maybe getting into big trouble in Denmark, in gangs or alternative lifestyles that could maybe have crushed me or led me to using stuff that people can fall in as young people and all that. But I'm also like traumatized in many ways, because I kept dealing with these 2 cultures, and I tried being part of one of it, and minimizing the other, and that helped a lot. And then later I started being part of the other and minimizing the first, and that helped a lot. And now I think about 20 years after, and not the least after almost 14 years in Greenland, so part of my life in Denmark has also been Greenland mostly. Greenland is somehow also Danish, but not so Danish, and different in many ways. And that had also a big part of my life. And I have been talking of my time in Greenland in a period of its own, because it deserves it. And so this is just to talk about my early life in Denmark and how I evolved into being that multicultural, double cultural personality who had these feelings for Denmark and loyalty to it, at the same time feelings and loyalty for their religion. And when they clashed, well, everything in me clashed, and I had to take sides, and I took sides with my religion because that's deeper and more profounded. And then later, when I saw the facade of these people not being true to these values, I had to make re-evaluation, and I went out of it and got persecuted for it, and had times in where I was in danger and had a difficulty in meeting people. I was isolated in many ways. And so I got over it, hopefully, and Greenland was a big help in that. And now I can maybe, fortunately, look back and try to find the balances between the Danish and my religious Arabic background and culture, and try to somehow combine them. I never forget a Jewish rabbi, the son of that rabbi I met with, when he saw that I was under big pressure, and also in my changes of view, and he said that nobody should pressure you to neglect your origin, culture, or who you are. You should stick to that and your identity. And he could see that I was running away from that old identity with all my might, and like succumbing to the Danish way of living and doing things. And that was his good advice, and I never forget it, because I think the Jewish people struggle with the same thing. They do not want to become totally assimilated, but they do not want to stick out either. And sometimes you get into big trouble with that, and you become like a double-faced person, even though you don't want to, but you're just trying to like walk on more than one path. And finally, I found it in the Star Trek movies later, when Spock's father says this famous word to him, and we all know that Leonard Nimoy is a Jew himself, and the story is also out of that memory of people seeking another universe and seeking new life. And he said to him, "You will always be part of two cultures." He's partly Vulcan and partly human, and that's the situation for me and many others. We are part of two cultures, and sometimes it can give us conflicts, and we try to get out of it by only being in one culture, and what can you say? You identify with it, and then you minimize your contact with the other culture. And so I have been in both. I've been 15 years or 20 in one culture, the religious mostly, and neglecting as much as I could and minimizing the contact with the other culture. And then for the last 10 years or so, I got more and more involved in my Danish side and Danish culture, also the religious Christian culture in it, and the philosophical culture in it, and the just ordinary way of life in it, as much as I could, and minimize totally or put on hold my contact with my old religious and cultural Arabic side. And now I have been on a new journey to try to find the balances, the new wings I can fly with in between these two cultures. So that's my early life in Denmark, and I'm happy I got the chance to talk a bit about it.